Albert Hammond is a legendary singer and songwriter of over 5 decades. Now, he's collaborated with many people and achieved worldwide legendary status for the songs that he's written that other people have covered. Now, in this interview, he tells his own story and, of course, the stories behind many of the most famous songs in our lifetime.
It was so much her song because to her, it was about her children. That same night, he said, get on a plane and come over to Austin tomorrow. He says he will do it. A song that I thought was written for a man was sung by a woman, and it worked. And I sang, give me one moment in time when I'm more than I thought I could be, when all of my dreams are a heartbeat away and the answers are all up to me. I said, what do you think of that?
Don't go away. Stick with me for the Albert Hammond interview. I just want to say, which I always do, please subscribe. It helps me, allows you to find out straight away when I've posted something new on this site. So without further ado, let's get on with it and get into this fascinating interview with Albert Hammond. Albert Hammond, welcome. First of all, I want to say, I mean, it's a massive privilege to meet you because you're someone who has performed and written also written for other people songs that have accompanied all our lives. I mean, you've written for Aretha Franklin, Celine Dion, Whitney Houston, God, Julio Iglesias and Willie Nelson, Tina Turner, Glenn Campbell, the Hollies, Starship. I mean, if I went on with this list, I think I'll take up the whole bloody hour. So I think I'll stop there while the going's good. But really, it is an immense privilege to interview someone who has written a soundtrack of our lives. So first of all, I want to thank you for that. And I want to take you back because I know you were born in London and you went back to Gibraltar very, very young with your family. And this going back to Gibraltar was then just post-war. And I just wondered what your first memories were of the difficulties of growing up as a child in a post-war Gibraltar.
Yes, well, I was born in London because the women and children were evacuated. My father stayed in Gibraltar because he, the men stayed there to, I don't know, I suppose to defend it, with the British. And I was only 3 months old or 4 months old when the women and children were brought back in 1944. And my growing up in Gibraltar, actually, I have great memories. I was looking at my granddaughter. She's 3 years old, my son's daughter, and the other day, and I said to myself, "Wow! I mean, if one could stay like this, because everything seems beautiful, and there doesn't seem to be any danger. There's no fear. There's no anything, and so that my upbringing in Gibraltar was very similar. I didn't realize that there was a border until I got older. I mean, I didn't realize so many things. So I would say that I was a very privileged person, not in the sense that my parents had money, because they didn't, and my father was a fireman, and so we would sometimes get the rich people's toys that the firemen picked up. And I mean, I remember having a cowboy hat and a gun, but you couldn't put the thing to make it make a noise, so you just went with your mouth.
What creativity were you brought up around? Were your parents, you said that your father was a fireman, were your parents in any way, were they listeners of music? Did they love music? Did they play music?
Yeah, I think music was with the people there because, we didn't have what we have today, and we couldn't afford records and things like that. So you put on the radio, and the radio, the great thing about Gibraltar was the radio played English, Spanish, Moroccan. So the English, you got all the everything from R&B to pop to rock to jazz to just everything. And in the Spanish, you got everything also, you know, from zarzuelas to coplas to flamenco, and then the Moroccan music, which was also heard there. So my influence with music as a young, I mean, really young. I mean, I was 4 months old when I got there, so I was listening to all this kind of music since then. It was incredible, you know. Then I joined the choir because I had what they said was a nice voice, you know. So I joined the choir and I worked hard, and I became head choir boy, and so they allowed me to sing solos. And so on a Sunday, I would sing a solo in the middle of a song. You know, I would be left alone to sing with the organ and the organ master. You know, and I remember my parents after the service was over, the congregation would gather outside the church in Gibraltar, the Church of the Holy Trinity. It was, I get, Church of England, you know. And, you know, people would come up and say, oh, I love the way your son sang today. And I saw these smiles on my parents' faces, you know, and I thought, that'd be a nice thing to do, you know. I can make people happy, you know.
Was music as an escape for you, though? Was it some form of you know, if I think of music in my, more in my teenage years than being much younger, but with all the teenage problems that everyone faces, you know, music sort of provided another world where I could, in a sense, live in another world away from my parents. So I just wondered when that came up for you.
Well, that came up later, you know, when I realized that I liked singing, and I realized that I made people smile. Then I got more into it, you know, and then I heard of a guy called Buddy Holly, you know, and I think everybody has been influenced, at least in my time, and I think in the 20th century, you know, because he had such a short career, and yet he wrote such incredible things. And most of them basically 3 chords, you know. So I made a deal with my father's barber that if I came and sweep the hairs off the floor, that he was a flamenco player, that he would teach me 3 chords so I could sing Buddy Holly songs. So I mean, it was just, I really, when I say I was privileged, I was, because living in Gibraltar in those days was very safe, you know. The only time it wasn't safe was when the sailors came in, you know, or, you know, the forces, you know, the army, the navy, the air force, and they would get drunk and they would destroy the place, you know. So that was always scary, but otherwise, it was really great, even though we had Franco on the other side, you know. For me, it was just a natural, a normal, just a safe place to live and be happy and grow up and make friends. And, you know, your parents were strict with you. They wanted you, you know, to have an education, if not in school, which obviously they did too, but at home, you know. And I was very mischievous, so I got into trouble a few times, you know.
So you said that, you know, your parents, like all parents, they want you to have an education. They also want you to have what they see as a stable life. And creativity is often not seen as stability. And I just wondered when you started, because I know that you were in a band and you performed in Spain in your teenage years. So maybe take me through that and how your parents were reacting at that time to you moving into this area.
My father comes from a family of 6 children. My mother comes from a family of 3. And my mother and father were always in favor of my creativity. My mother, because she had an experience when she was pregnant with me, that was a spiritual experience, you know. So she felt something special about creativity. My father bought me my first guitar, which was a flamenco guitar. It wasn't even a steel string guitar. But you can imagine anything when you're creative, you know. You can imagine that you can play it like, you know, like Johnny Cash, or so. And it costs like, I think it cost my dad like £3.50, you know. Then, you know, I taught what I knew to a friend of mine, and we started to sing in at parties, you know. And then I realized that as we went to parties and sang, that all these girls came around, you know. And so I said, so it was all experience to experience, you know, as things came up, you know. And then I formed this band called the Diamond Boys, and we played in Gibraltar, and then we got a contract to play in Morocco, first in Sidi Slimane and then in Casablanca. And I was 16 or something, and the others were 15, and so we went over there and we did all this, and then we came back to Gibraltar. We heard of a festival in Madrid in Spain, and so by then we got this manager from Gibraltar. I mean, he didn't know what a manager was, but he kind of took care of us, you know, because he was older. And so we went to Madrid, and we went to the place and said, we want to enter this competition. And they said, well, you can enter, but the posters are done, so your name can't go on the poster, but you can enter, you know. So we did, and it was like a month where the weekends, groups from everywhere came to compete, and they were eliminated. And we got to the final, and then we won. And so, to our surprise, you know, and so we got a record deal with RCA in Spain, you know, and so the Diamond Boys made their first record, and then it didn't last very long, 9 months, a year, and they just wanted to keep playing around there, and I wanted to go further. I kept the guy that I'd first taught, Richard Cartwright, the guy I'd first taught how to play some chords, and we did Everly songs and stuff. And we carried on. We went to England, and we made a record in England. In fact, we made like 3 records, and we did Thank You Lucky Stars and some other TV shows, you know, with Kathy Kirby and the Hollies and Jerry and the Pacemakers, and we thought, oh, we made it.
I mean, a lot of people I've talked to talk about an event, and it doesn't have to be very traumatic, but an event in their childhood or a relationship in their childhood, sometimes with their parents, that is a sort of kickoff for the drive that they have in life. If I think of myself, you know, I ended up being a presenter on MTV, and my father didn't have anything to do with me. And I think in this therapeutic way, I've had a lot of therapy with that, I looked for love elsewhere. So being on TV was an attempt of the compensation of love I didn't get from my father. And I just wondered if you've, you know, because I know that you're quite spiritual, and I know that you do think about these things, whether you've ever analyzed your childhood and said, oh yeah, that was one of the key events in my life.
Well, my father's brothers, they didn't want me to do what I was doing, you know. In fact, they got me a job as a telecommunication mechanic, you know, when I was about 15. And I worked, that means I worked for the telephone. So the first thing they asked me to do was to, to take apart a telephone and put it together. And when I did it, there were so many pieces left over that they realized I wasn't going to be very good. You know? So anyways, I mean, I had love within, you know. I, I, I think later on in my life, I needed more reassurance. You know, I became more insecure. When I was young, I was so sure of everything. Uh, Maybe it was because I was spiritual, because I wasn't religious, you know, but I was spiritual. I believed in compassion. I believed in being kind. I believed that we should love each other more than we actually do, you know, and be there for each other and all those things.
How exciting was London? Because there's this brilliant YouTube clip that I saw this morning, and it's the song A Way of Life, Family Dog. And
Yes.
it's from 1969, and it features a very handsome young man on guitar in that that clip. And the song is written by Greenaway and Cook, who of course were the, you know, major songwriters of the day. And
Major,
anyone who knows Blue Mink and
yeah,
bands like that will know them.
yeah.
Something got a hold of my heart, I think they wrote, didn't they? They wrote
That's
some
right. Yeah,
amazing,
yeah.
amazing tracks.
You've got your
Um,
troubles, I got mine, you know.
yeah. So how exciting was that period? And what do you feel you were able to glean from songwriters who were successful at that period before your later success came in? What did you glean from them?
Well, I'd learned actually a little bit before about songwriting because I had met Mike Hazelwood before The Family Dog, um, and before I'd met Cook and Greenaway, and it was during the time that I worked at the Grosvenor House Hotel that I met Mike Hazelwood, and he would come to the hotel because we got free meals because I worked there, and you know, we would write songs after we'd eaten something. We'd write songs, and then I'd go back to work, and he would go on. So you know, I also went to see, and that's where I met Mike originally. Went to see Shaftesbury Music. The guy there was Jeffrey Everett, and they were part of Radio Luxembourg. And so I met Mike there, and because Jeffrey Everett thought Mike and I would make a good, you know, songwriting team. Um, and the first hit we had was Little Arrows by Lee P. Lee, but the second one was Make Me an Island by Joe Dolan. And then we wrote more songs for Joe Dolan. In fact, we had, I think, 3 or 4 hits with Joe, you know. Like You're Such a Good Looking Woman and Teresa. And so by the time, you know, Mike and I were successful, we were more like we could meet the successful songwriters because we were now successful, you know. And so I got together with Roger Cook and I wrote Good Morning Freedom and Freedom Come, Freedom Go. Um, and, uh, um, and then with Mike, we wrote a children's television show that starred Freddie and the Dreamers. And the hit from that was a song called Gimme That Ding. I don't know if
I
you
remember
remember.
that. Yeah, give me that ding, give me that ding.
Exactly.
God,
Yeah.
it's
and, and we were very happy, you know. And then we formed the Family Dog with Steve Rowland, who I had met in Spain, because he was an actor who wanted to be a singer, and he tried it in Spain. And so when I met Steve in London, we both loved dogs. So we thought we'd form a group like the Fifth Dimension, kind of, you know, of 3 guys and 2 girls, you know, and we were thinking of names, and we both had Tibetan Terriers, so we thought, call it the Family Dog with a double G.
and London must have been terribly exciting at that stage because I think the creative bubble
Yeah,
of people who were creating music, and the bands and the session musicians and the writers. It was quite small, but they were all together. Can you tell me about how that sort of people fed off each other and how they met?
It was incredible. I mean, I met with Les Reed and Barry Mason. I met with the guy who produced the Beatles. So you meet all these people, then you have this group, and then suddenly you're going to make a record, and you've got Jimmy Page on guitar, and you've got John Paul Jones arranging and playing the bass. So without realizing, you were mingling with a group called Led Zeppelin. So, and it didn't matter, we were all kind of friendly, and just because they were Led Zeppelin didn't mean they couldn't play on a session,
So was someone like George Martin, which was who we're trying to
George
remember.
Martin,
Yeah, was someone like George Martin someone who was also open to?
Totally.
Oh, wow.
Totally. I mean, unbelievable, the whole of Air London, because they became 4 producers, George Martin, Peter Sullivan, John Burgess, and the guy who produced the Hollies. Again, names, it's so difficult when you've lived such an immense life, and met so many people. But yes, the beauty, I think, of the times there was that people's egos were not that huge. We really, at least I know I really was happy when somebody was successful, when a friend of mine was successful. It made me happy, and it also told me you can do the same. So it wasn't like, why should he have that and not me? It was very different. So those times for me were like the times in Gibraltar. I mean, there was love and compassion, and people got together and helped each other, And then when we went to Los Angeles in 1970, I found the same kind of thing in the music business. I found that, when I finally got to audition for Clive Davis and 30 other people, from publishers to producers, and I got the go ahead to make my first record as a solo artist, and I went in the studio with the Wrecking Crew.
Yeah, which were these group of musicians who were basically on about 400 hits, weren't they? They were on masses of hits.
Everyone from the Beach Boys to Neil Diamond, to just everyone and anyone, and they were so good, and they helped you, and because you came from overseas, they were even more, being kind and loving to you, and trying to understand you, and then they would say, what do you think if I add this thing here, and I would say, sounds great to me.
I mean, it must have been interesting with Americans when you say you're from Gibraltar, because I can't imagine.
I did a Johnny Carson show.
I've seen that. It's fantastic.
Have you seen that? Yeah,
Yes.
It's so funny, because I was totally naive about all this stuff. I mean, I was just there telling the truth, telling, when the border closed, what happened, and how we drove around in circles and all that kind of stuff, and it's hilarious. I mean, I can't believe that, that happened.
So the first record that you released in the States, was that Never Rains in Southern California?
Yeah,
this was the album that really garnered you attention, wasn't it? And this was something that made an impact. And there's a track on the album, and if I think of Marvin Gaye and his album What's Going On, which was an ecological album,
my favorite album, Marvin Gaye's What's Going On.
And is that what inspired you to write Down by the River?
Down by the River? No,
Oh,
No, what
wow.
inspired me to write Down by the River, Mike and I, because we were partners and we wrote together, was the fact that every time we looked up at the Hollywood Hills, we couldn't see the Hollywood sign. And we'd say, what is this yellow, orangey smoke that, you know? And so we'd ask people and they would say, oh, that's pollution. And we couldn't figure out what pollution was, you know, because we never heard, at least I hadn't. In Gibraltar, I never heard pollution. Then Gibraltar is it's a peninsula, so the wind blows and you get no pollution there, you know. So that was the reason we wrote Down by the River, you know, was the fact that we found out about smog and pollution, and we started to get more into it and realized that, you know, that the rivers were being poisoned and the oceans was being poisoned and the land was being poisoned and we were being poisoned, you know. And I think it was probably one of the first green songs, ecological songs written.
Yeah, and it's interesting because obviously, I mean, to reference your recent album, The Body of Work, which is, you know, about your whole body of work, do you think did you think back then that a song could save the world?
You know, I've always thought that music is a healer. And I've always thought that music heals human beings. And so if music heals human beings, then music can save the world, you know. The song, you think you're going to save the world. I mean, I call it Save the World. But you think you're going to save the world is the fact that, you know, it doesn't seem like we can, but not because of every one of us, but because of the lunacy that's going on with grown-up people and their corruption and their egos and their I don't understand it. You know, I don't understand, you know, people that are grown up, that have children, that can think the way they think, you know. So I try and express myself in the best way I can in everything that happens in life, you know. And part of Body of Work came from that. I mean, I got divorced in 2016 after 40 years, you know, and not because I wanted to. I thought it would be, you know, that at my age, I wouldn't want to do that, you know. And then the pandemic came, you know, and then the vaccines, and we needed to have them because not only would it save your life, but you couldn't travel if you didn't. You know, I wouldn't have taken them if I could have traveled, but you couldn't. So I had to travel. So I took them, and then after that, I got an autoimmune disease that I'm still dealing with. And I know a few other musicians that have autoimmune diseases after the vaccines, and we just have to deal with it, you know. So all this was a heavy weight on my shoulders.
I mean, to talk about Body of Work, was that a point then, you know, going through this divorce and having these things happen to you, and also the external thing of COVID coming in and then, you know, having an impact on you because of the vaccine, then was the studio a safe place for you to retreat and regroup? Is that what it is for you?
Yes, I mean, I actually say sometimes, you know, Buddhists go to the mountains. I went to the studio. Yeah. I mean, I could have gone with a Buddhist. The problem, look what happened to someone who went with a Buddhist and he came back and they'd stolen his money. Leonard Cohen.
Yeah. So this going back to this first album, because, you know, it had some immense tracks on it, you know, Down by the River, It Never Rains in Southern California.
Yeah, but think about Listen to the World.
Yeah.
I mean, look at those words.
Yeah.
We wrote it in 1970, you know, but I mean, you know, those words, you could relate today to those words.
So this first album, because it was a success, and in a certain way it launched you in America, and you mentioned going on Johnny Carson, so it obviously did launch you quite dramatically in America. Was it also a launching pad there? Were you writing with Mike, collaborating with Mike? Was it a launching pad for you to start really writing for other artists?
I think the other artists came, came because of that album. In other words, I got to know the Everlys, and especially Phil Everly, and he recorded The Air That I Breathe, and he actually had done a whole album that he'd written, except for that song. And he knew the Hollies were fans. I mean, I think everybody in England were fans of the Everlys, even the Beatles, and he sent his album and said, choose a song, of mine and do it. And they chose The Air That I Breathe, that he hadn't written, So every time he saw me, he would say, you son of a bitch, because there were 9 of his songs and they happened to choose the one that he hadn't written, and I think that started it, and then Cass Elliot recorded If You Gotta Break Another Heart, and the one we were talking about before. So the Hollies did The Air That I Breathe, then Cass Elliot did If You Gotta Break Another Heart and Listen to the World. She recorded those 2 songs, and I realized that you could actually write songs for people. So on my 3rd album, I was asked to write a song for Garfunkel. He was doing an album in San Francisco with Roy Halley, who produced Simon and Garfunkel. This great producer engineer, and so Mike and I got to go up there, and we'd written this song called "Mary Was an Only Child," and so we went up there. Art recorded the song. It was on his first solo album, but I got to meet Roy Halley. And when I met Roy Halley, there was a nice little chemistry there, and there were like 4 or 5 studios there. So I was recording with Roy Halley in one studio, and Santana was recording in the other studio. And suddenly, if you needed like a bongo player or a percussionist, you just go next door and say, listen, can we borrow you for 10 minutes, And so that's how I'm a Train came along, It's a song written in the early to mid 60s by Mike and I, but it was never, it was recorded by many people, but it was never a success, until I did it, and then became a success. I don't know why, but sometimes songs, they wait for their right moment or whatever it is. I can tell you that about To All the Girls I've Loved Before. It was 11 years old when Julio asked me to help him out with his first English record. And, I wanted to give him that song, but already Engelbert and a zillion other people had recorded it, including myself, in 1973 or 4. And this was 83. So I went home and I recorded it onto a cassette. And I said, I've just written a brand new song for you, Julio. And he said, play it. And I played it, and he said, oh, I love this. We have to record this right now. And so we did it that night. And then I called Julio's Willie's manager that same night. He said, get on a plane and come over to Austin tomorrow, and Willie he says he will do it, And so sometimes songs, that was like 10 or 11 years it waited,
I mean, on the base of that one, and what's really fascinating is that it really feels like 2 people from different worlds. Julio Iglesias from one world and Willie Wilson from a completely different world, but somehow it works.
It worked because it's going against the grain. That's what Willie had just come off this huge hit with You Were Always on My Mind from the Stardust album. So he was like really hot at that moment. And Julio was, the playboy from Europe, and I thought, put the Playboy and the cowboy together, and they both sing with their hearts, and they both have a particular sound. When you hear Willie, it's Willie. When you hear Julio, it's Julio.
Don't go away. There's more coming up. And don't forget, please subscribe. It helps me and it allows you to find out when I've posted something new on this site. Okay, coming up, Albert Hammond and those stories behind some of the world's most famous songs.
So I thought it was perfect, and CBS actually scolded me for that because they thought I was ruining their Playboy, their international Playboy, with this cowboy.
What does it take for a singer to be able to sort of embody the emotions of a song and to make it appear as if it's theirs so that we believe them? And people like Whitney, of course, Tina, who you've worked with, even Leo Sayer with When I Need You. I think that's something that was really an embodiment of the feeling of the song. What do they have to have? What's special about those artists that they can do that?
Well, first of all, they have to love the song, and they have to love it for an inward reason, a personal reason, not, oh, it sounds like a hit, I mean, a good example of that is Diana Ross, When You Tell Me That You Love Me, because when she received that song, her main thing was, you wrote this for my children. So it was so much her song, because to her, it was about her children. And the beauty of songs is that to each person that hears it, they make it their own. Because I've asked people, why do you like this song? And then someone else, and they all have different reasons of why, So they make the song their own by, because something happened in their lives. Somebody was born, somebody died, you fell in love, you felt fear. So many things that can happen in your life, that can, you said it, you went to psychiatrists, because you had to find the answer to love that you didn't seem to maybe have gotten when you were young. Some of us are luckier than that. So I think, songs they become personal to each person. I mean, the beauty of having sold over 300 million records is that that you've made over 300 million people happy,
That's a phenomenal number. I mean, that is just a phenomenal
number. Yeah. And I don't look at it that way. I just think of it in a different way. And all these songs that I've written, they're going to definitely outlive me. So when I go write new songs, it's because these don't belong to me anymore. They're done. They belong to the world. All these people have it, they bought it, so it belongs to them, and so you go and write something that's totally different, that belongs to the life you're living right now, the living the now, I mean, Eckhart Tolle is a good influence in a way, the fact
to live in the moment,
to live in the moment, exactly, and not in the past or the future, I mean, I think he always said, the past is gone, and the future, we don't know what's going to happen anyways, so that's what I try and do. And I don't know how I write the songs. I really don't. When I see people writing, teaching people how to write songs, I wish I could do that, because if I could do that, I could be helping people. I just don't know how, because it's with me, it's all energy. We are energy, and I get filled up with this energy. and it just takes me places, you know, it just takes me to, you know, to places that, to different plateaus, you know, and to, you know, to different worlds, and I get lost.
If you work with someone, let's say Carol Bayer-Sager, and you've worked on When I Need You with her, how does that collaboration work? Do you go in with any predetermined ideas? Did she come in with a predetermined idea? So how did that actually operate when you met?
I've never really written a song with anyone where they've come in with an idea and we've worked on it together. It's always been, I've come in with the idea and the melody, and we've worked on it together. So with Carol, what happened was that it was set up for me to work with Carol. I'd just come off a 9-month tour of the world, and I got to New York, and CBS invited me to see Paul McCartney and Wings, you know, Wings Over America, it was called, at Madison Square Garden. And I thought, when I came out of there, I got back to the hotel. I called my wife in LA, and, you know, I said, I think I'm going to retire, give up. I just saw the greatest. I don't think I could ever be that. And she said, you're nuts, you know, you're crazy, you're you, he's he, and all these things, you know, and I hadn't seen her still, you know, hadn't seen her for almost a year, you know. And she said to me, you do what you do, everybody else does what they do. And as soon as I hung up the phone, I picked up the guitar, I had tears in my eyes, and I started singing the tune of the chorus of When I Need You, you know. And When I Need You was the title, you know, that was in my mind. So when I got to Carol the next day, she loved the tune, she wanted to change, she wanted her, and then I said, look, this is why I have to keep When I Need You. And I told her the story, and she understood immediately. And that's the beauty of songwriting, that you can be open to, you know, because, you know, you might have had an idea 5 days ago, and then it's not going to fit. Imagine a different lyric to When I Need You, would never have been a hit.
Is it therapeutic to write a song then? Of
course. It's like meditation, playing the guitar, playing the piano. I suggest, you know, that children, as they grow up, learn an instrument that they can actually not, you know, just an instrument they can actually play melodies to, or an instrument they can strum or bang on that they can sing with, you know, because I think it's such a great way to meditate, because you just get lost in music, you know, you're lost in melody, and you're lost in words, and you're lost in music, you know, and it's so great, you know, because you're really not lost, you're just on a journey.
I mean, when you talk about a song like One Moment in Time, because it's for a specific event, was it the emotion of the event that triggered the idea, or did you actually have the idea before then in that case?
Well, in that case, the first words came from John Bettis. What I had in my mind was, if somebody was to sing this to represent America in the Olympics, who would I hear singing? And immediately Elvis came to mind. But Elvis was here. But I still kept his, you know, his energy was there. And I called John and asked him if he would want to collaborate on this song, because I was called, you know, and I said yes, always thinking they're probably called another 100 writers, you know.
I mean, John Bettis is an interesting character in himself, because he worked closely with Richard Carpenter, didn't he, on all those Carpenter's tracks, which were the most beautiful songs as well. How did the composition actually come together for One Moment in Time? Because there's different layers to it, aren't there?
Yeah, well, I told John, would you like to collaborate with me on a song for the Seoul 1988 Seoul Olympics? And he said, yes. I knew he was an Olympic, that he loves the Olympics. That's why I called him, I could have called Diane Warren, Hal David, I could have many people, but he was just the right person to call, I thought, anyways. And, I was thinking and having dinner. I just called him, and an hour later, I'm having dinner, and he calls and he says, what do you think of these 4 lines? And he says, give me one moment in time when I'm more than I thought I could be, when all of my dreams are a heartbeat away and the answers are all up to me. And I went, hang on a sec. And I went straight to the piano. I got up off the dinner table. I went straight to the piano, and immediately, I even didn't have to write the words down. They stayed in my mind, and immediately I played, and I know I was in the key of F, which, I can only play in the key of C, but I was playing in the key of F. And I sang, give me one moment in time when I'm more than I thought I could be, when all of my dreams are a heartbeat away and the answers are all up to me. I said, what do you think of that? And he says, did you just do that? And I said, I guess, and he says, that's great, And so the next day we got together and finished the song.
God, you must be the best dinner guest on the planet. To have someone round for dinner. If you've got a piano, if I had a piano, I'd invite you round for dinner, just because I know I'm going to get something special in that evening. You mentioned Diane Warren, and of course that was the Starship track, wasn't it? Nothing's going to stop us now. What was the sort of working relationship with her, and how did that song sort of gel and come about?
Diane and I, we were introduced to each other by a friend of mine and a friend of hers, and her friend and my friend thought, oh, we should put Diane and Albert together. And so they took us to lunch, and, Diane got off the table and said, I don't think I want to write with you. And that was it. And then a week later, we got in touch, and she'd had a hit by then. She'd had a hit with Rhythm of the Night. Yeah. And so a week later, we got together, and we were sitting at home in my house, and I was with Warner Brothers. They called and said, there's a script on the way. They want you to write a song for this movie called Mannequin, So I told Diane, oh, there's a script on the way. So, let's do whatever. But when it gets here, we should read it. Maybe we can write a song, because that's what they want, So we read the script, and we loved it. The Mannequin and the main artist got married in the end. I was going to get married 2 weeks after. This was 1987, something like that, of which I did, because I got married in 87. We just wrote the song right there, And I said to her, let's write a song, because I'm getting married and I'll use it at my wedding.
And so you did?
And we did, yeah. And I did. I used it at my wedding, yeah. The demo, not the master, the demo.
Now, when you write these songs and you've got the demos ready and they go out, I presume you don't have a choice who's going to buy them and who's going to record them necessarily, do you? I shouldn't think so.
I didn't know Whitney Houston was going to record that song. I thought it would be a guy, because I was thinking of Elvis.
So when you heard it, what was your reaction? Because that's, it's such a tremendous... No, from the Whitney Houston one, I would say.
Oh, gosh. I tell you, honestly and truthfully, I cried and I cried, and to the point where after I played it like 5 times, I went out and I banged on all my neighbors, and I asked them, would you please come? I want you to listen to something. And they all came, all of them, the husband, the wife, the kids, and to my house, and I played this Whitney Houston track of One Moment in Time that Clive Davis sent me, and it was just unbelievable. I mean, they just went bananas, they went crazy, So immediately, a song that I thought was written for a man was sung by a woman, and it worked, It worked maybe even better than if it would have been sung by a man, And obviously, Whitney was, I mean, the voice of of the 20th century, I would say.
I mean, I don't want to know who, but I just wondered, is there the opposite? Does it ever happen that someone records a song and you jar and you go, no, that's not what I wanted? Don't need to know who, just whether that happens.
I haven't found that. No, I found that people have recorded the song and it hasn't become a hit. But I haven't found any recordings. I mean, don't forget, I come from, from the late 50s, 60s. So I'm used to hearing, records that are not produced like, like in America, So I never found that. I found that I was just so happy if anyone would record my song. Because I think to a songwriter, it's always great to have a hit, a successful song, because you can live off it and it'll go on after you, But for those songs that weren't successful, I still love them just as much. And they still made me just as happy. And to know that someone, could pick one of my songs and record it, it's just such a great feeling to have. It doesn't matter if it's Joe Blow that nobody knows, because the Joe Blow that nobody knows could be the one that is the name later that becomes the big artist. I mean, Joe Dolan hadn't had a hit before Make Me an Island or Good Looking Woman, Lee P. Lee hadn't had a hit before Little Arrows, So, I mean, to get unknowns and to get well-known people, I mean, to have worked with people like Johnny Cash, who asked me for a song, and for him to invite me to his home, in Memphis, and to to stay there for a week with him, and for him, he cooked me every day. He cooked a meal for me, and we went into the studio with the Carter family and the Oak Ridge Boys, and I was able to produce, a couple of songs I'd written and a song he'd written with him. It's just an incredible feeling. But just as much as that's an incredible feeling, it's also an incredible feeling to have, someone that, that is not that well known, record your song, because it's about that, isn't it? You don't know what's going to happen because you don't know the future. So when someone records your song, it makes you happy.
America was a country that really sort of gave you the push to be this world famous songwriter, and I don't suppose that could have happened anywhere else in the world, purely because of how pop music is, particularly in that period. A lot came out of America. I know Britain had a play, but you had to go to America to achieve worldwide fame, in a sense. It was the place.
I think because the world looks at America, like if you make it in America, you've made it in the world. I don't know if that will be, will carry on. I have no idea, but I know that, going, everybody wants to go to America because they know they can if they have a chance in life, it's in America,
But on body of work, I think the song was called American Flag, which felt like a sort of that maybe you'd had at one point, I don't know what the word is, but got disillusioned maybe with America or got disillusioned with a side of America. Can you explain
Yes,
that?
I'm never disillusioned with a country, because I think all countries are really beautiful countries, you know, and I think the earth is a beautiful place and a beautiful place to live. And it's the only, you know, little sphere, you know, little rock, you know, that we know that life exists, you know. So I think in body of work and American flag, what I'm saying is, you know, we are not being honest with each other. You know, there's too much corruption, and there's too much lying, and you know, the technology has, you know, is so new that it's taken us, I think, to a disastrous place. Maybe as we learn more about it, then things settle down, you know. But, you know, I suppose, you know, when gunpowder was first invented, you know, by this Swedish guy, and he did it because he wanted to make tunnels to go through mountains, you know, and then people used it to kill each other. I suppose this is a bit the same. This technology, we you know, oh, this is new. I mean, I now, you know, I have a friend who said, look, in 2 minutes, I can write a song on this. And so he tells AI what, you know, what the song should be about. You know, you just get a little bit of a story, and then it says, can you give me a lyric on what I've just said? And it gives you a whole lyric with a chorus. And then you say, oh, can you put some music to it, a la Whitney Houston, or a la, I don't know, Pink Floyd, whatever, you know. And a minute later, you know, he plays the music. Oh, can you have someone sing it like whoever? And boom, you have a song. And it sounds like every other song that you hear today, written today, in you know, on Spotify or whatever. So, you know, until we realize that that is harming us, because the beauty is to write a song from the heart, you know, not to write a song with technology. Um,
You know, I totally get, and I'm sure they can actually write in there, please write me a song like Albert Hammond would write a song. I mean, you know, I actually believe that that is there. But I totally agree with you. We need to know how to deal with this technology. One
we need,
person that you wrote a song for that was I mean, I wasn't friends with her, but I interviewed her 12 times, and I was in her circle with Roger Davis, Tina Turner, of course. And she had an impact on me because of her as a human being.
as a human being, yes.
And I just wonder what sort of impact she had on you, because you wrote a song, I think it was with Graham Lyle,
Graham
wasn't it?
Lyle, I don't
Yeah.
want to, yes, and Way of the World. We wrote those two songs together. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I know because
I
I
wrote,
remember her talking about I Don't Want to Lose You to me and how
yeah,
much she loved that song.
yes, 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 yes. Uh, you know, obviously, the artist, whoever's going to do it, has to fall in love with the song. That's a very important thing, you know. I don't think I or anyone could convince an artist if they don't love the song. So, I mean, the way that song was written, uh, I they'd set up for me to write with Graham Lyle. It took like 2 years because I'm in LA and he's in England, you know. And my publisher then, Bob Grace, he'd set this up, you know, and I just got in, and the next day I was supposed to write, and I was jet lagged. I couldn't sleep that night, and he knocked on my door at 8 in the morning, and he said, we have a date at 10 o'clock with Graham Lyle. I said, oh, Bob, I'm not going to make it, man. I'm so tired, you know. They said, you can't do this, you know. It's taken a long time, whatever, you know. So, so I said, okay, just give me 5 minutes. I'll shower and, you know, and then we'll go. And we did. And we drove for like an hour down, I think it's Bromley, I think, or something, where he lived. And I got there, and Graham's a wonderful guy, you know, and he, you know, he offered me some, you know, some coffee or some breakfast or whatever. And a couple of times this has happened to me. And so I was left alone in the studio, and I saw this beautiful blonde J200. It sounds like I'm talking about a woman, you know, a nice, beautiful blonde J200, you know. And I picked it up, and I just went, you know, from D to E minor, and I started to sing, I don't want to lose you. I don't even want to say goodbye, you know. And, you know, he walked into the studio and he said, that's nice. What is that? I said, I don't know. Your guitar inspired me, you know. And he said, let's put that down. So we did, you know. And then he said, oh, yesterday, because I knew you were coming, I worked on something. So he plays it, and it's in a totally different key, you know. Women of a certain age, totally in a different key, you know. And so we looked at each other and we said, wow, there's something about these two things that work, but they're in different keys. And we just had to work out how to make it work, since they were in different keys. And that's how the song was written, you know.
That's amazing. I mean, sorry.
I went back to LA, and I demoed the song, and I sent it to Roger Davis, and Tina fell in love with it.
Yeah, I mean, what's amazing with also with Graham Lyle, of course, because he wrote with Terry Britten, What's Love Got to Do with It? And he was one of the key people, really, in Tina's resurrection, you know, as a solo artist with the Private Dancer album, wasn't he? And he's not often really given that credit, which is, you know, which he should have been done.
Yes, yes. I give him that credit.
Yeah.
Tina gave him that credit because Terry Britten is in the musical in a way, you know, because I was at the opening of that. Of the musical in London, because she also in that musical is Don't Turn Around, which she originally recorded, by the way, and they put it on a B-side, you know, before anyone else recorded it. And there's another song called Be Tender With Me, Baby, that's also in the musical. Yeah. So I was sitting there next to Graham Lyle, and Terry Britten was somewhere else. I said, do you want me to change so your partner's next? Oh, no, but it's fine, you know. You know, wow. Yes, but it's so strange. I mean, there's so much magic in life and in the world and in the universe, and there's so much connection to so many things. And when you start believing in spirituality, you know, in that there is something greater, that you really are energy, that this is just like, you know, like the outside, like the car, you know, that will, you know, like the train that will go to the breaker's yard in the end, like the I'm a train song. You know? So this stays behind, but the energy carries on. I really do believe, I'm getting more to believe that we come back many, many times because it's energy, and the energy carries on. And, you know, I don't know, we never remember, and or sometimes we do. Sometimes we talk about, wow, I've been here before, I've seen this or something, you know, never quite knowing, you know, but still, the longer I live, the more I believe that there's a connection in life, you know, to our energy that carries on.
Well, Albert Hammond, it's been wonderful talking to you. I've had the most immense 2 days listening not only to the album body of work, but your whole body of work. And it's been enlightening. It's brought back lots of memories, personal memories for me, because songs really do hold memories of your own life. And so I want to thank you for that. And I think really on behalf of everyone, because people who are creative and have put things out in the world are extremely brave. And when they've had such immense impact and success as someone like you, I think we should thank them for their contribution to the culture. So I'm saying, for me and for everyone, Albert Hammond, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. It's just wonderful,
Up there is an interview I recommend. Down there is where you can find all the podcast interviews. And here is where you can connect.